Bonnie McElveen Hunter is as bright, intelligent, and cheerful as her countenance and her beautiful red outfits might hint. She is the chairman of the American Red Cross, the first woman to hold that position, appointed by President Bush in 2005. She's the past ambassador, American ambassador to Finland, where she served with distinction and received many honors. And if you had a chance to look at the speakers' bios, you can read some of that. I'm not going to take the time. I want to have Bonnie come up here and spend time with you. She is the founder and CEO of Pace Communications, the country's largest custom publishing company. She is an incredibly successful business person, diplomat, and humanitarian. But Bonnie doesn't just walk the walk, she talks the talk. In other words, in addition to doing all that, she's a tireless advocate for women's rights, women's issues, and children's issues. Now let me tell you some things that you maybe don't know about Bonnie. Because she's tireless, because she has to spend 20 hours a day at all of these causes, she rises in the morning at 5 a.m. or earlier to exercise. She eats 5 meals a day at least. Her travel bag weighs at least 50 pounds. It's full of books and unsalted nuts to nourish both her body and her mind and give her wisdom and strength. Now, I know that bag weighs at least 50 pounds because I've carried it through airports and deserts, through convention centers and water treatment centers, to ambassadors' homes and to refugee camps, from presidential palaces to little grass huts in the middle of Central Africa. There is no one with whom I would rather share a foxhole. Thankfully, I haven't had the need to have a foxhole because of the Red Cross emblem on our vests and because of the advance teams steeped with intelligence that keep us out of trouble. Although, Bonnie, we were close a couple of times in the Middle East and Central Africa, out just ahead of the rebels. Bonnie McElveen Hunter is tireless, as I said. I can hear the excitement in her voice. I can see the smile on her face, even from the phone at 5 a.m. And Bonnie, 5 a.m. your time is 3 a.m. my time. It is my honor to introduce my dear friend, Bonnie McElveen Hunter.
Wow, what an introduction. And you're right, Steve, we were often in danger, but I have to say I always felt that we never walked alone. And we have been safe in the most amazing places, including refugee camps and, yes, in the Middle East. And we've had the incredible privilege of this life of amazing ranginess from, yes, presidential palaces to grass huts. Thank you. And thank you for your friendship. Now, I've learned that when Steve invites you somewhere, it's just easier to get to know, to yes. Don't waste your time on no. Yes, you can hear he's brilliantly erudite and mesmerizingly sagacious and cerebrally beguiling. But what I love most is what is in Steve's heart. And I think you all felt that this morning. Well, he has an amazing gift that he is gracious, but he is humble and he's unassuming. and sometimes I have found actually generous to a fault. In fact, you've heard this story perhaps that Steve ran for class president, but he didn't want to vote for himself. So he cast his vote for his opponent, who won by 1 vote. So, as many of you already know, he is indeed the first American. Can you imagine that America was not represented on the Standing Commission of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Society? That we are a major funder to an organization where we literally had no seat at the table and no voice. I talked him into representing America and running for office. And let me just tell you, that means that everybody has an equal vote. Somalia has an equal vote to the United States of America. And I can tell you, it was a landslide, and Steve was elected. Congratulations, Steve. So, we are all grateful for Steve's leadership, but I stand here this morning truly as a grateful American, a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a business owner, and chairman of the board of one of the greatest humanitarian organizations in the world, the American Red Cross. I have seen our work in the worst of times and our response. And I have to tell you that we truly are at our best when times are at their worst, and that we reach out to people who are the least and the last and the lost at their most critical hour of need. And I'm extremely proud of that service. I'm also grateful today that we have so many amazing women in this room, and for me particularly, some very good friends who have come to participate. In fact, one of today's participants has joined me in Madagascar, Teresa Carlson, as we started to immunize, believe it or not, 19 million children. So, Teresa, thank you for being here. And before I go any further, I want to thank Dr. Kostra and Boise State University for inviting us and for having a terrific partnership with Dr. David Adler to make all of this possible today. I think Dr. Adler's ability to remember every word of a speech with no notes, I think we need inside this man's brain. And he does it all with incredible energy and leadership. Now, I do understand that last year that Alan Simpson was a recipient of the Andrus Award for political leadership. And I just had the privilege last week of introducing the other half of that team, that household name, Simpson Bowles. I introduced Erskine Bowles at an event. And Erskine said something that I thought, Dr. Kustra, might really be helpful to you as the president of the university, because Erskine became the president of the UNC education system. And he said that someone asked him, what was it like to be the president of a university system? And he said he had to think about it for a long time, and he finally decided. He said, well, it's a lot like being the CEO of a cemetery. He said there are a lot of people below you, and nobody's listening. Well, Dr. Adler, we're all listening today. Well, and I can also tell you that I can't go one more moment without acknowledging one of our special honored guests today, the most special guest, one of America's most influential people who happens to be a woman. She is a woman who loves fly fishing, tennis. She's even cracked the innermost sanctum of male power with a hole-in-one. She has the heart of a prize fighter, infinite compassion, and a deep faith and love of this country. One of the reasons that the people of America, I believe, lose their hearts to her, is she seems to have no idea how extraordinary she really is. Yes, you heard her last night. She describes herself as a cowgirl from Arizona. We are indeed fortunate to be hearing from Sandra Day O'Connor, a little bit later today. But I saw her sneak in. So Sandra, thank you for being here this morning. Now, flying to Boise yesterday, I wondered what in the world had afforded me the opportunity to be before all of you. And I could hear my mother saying, "Honey, it was divine intervention. You had great parents." And in fact, I did. My father was one of the original 7 U-2 pilots who flew over Russia at the height of the Cold War. I'm sure in his wildest imagination, he never expected that his daughter would be serving as a U.S. ambassador beneath those skies. My dad is in the Lord's loving arms, but I always feel his special presence with me as I do today. Now, I have to tell you that people would ask me, what was it that made you successful as a diplomat in Finland? And I found that there were 3 things: protocol, geritol, and alcohol. So I think I better tell you the 3 reasons that I'm here today. So first, I think we all stand on a foundation. And mine, honestly, growing up in a military family with a mother that was with us and a father that was gone for long periods of time, I will tell you that it's my mother's pearls of wisdom that I stand on even today. So let me share them with you. Time is precious. Use it wisely. Mediocrity is the greatest sin. Work is the greatest privilege. Failure is a comma, never a period. And can't is a word that does not exist. Yes, my mother had my brother, sister, and I write the word can't on a piece of paper. When we were small, she had lots of shoe boxes. We put it inside a shoebox. She took us to the backyard in Bossier City, Louisiana, where we were living at the time, and with a shovel, she instructed us to dig a hole. We did. We put the shoebox in the hole, we covered the hole, and she reminded us that the word can't is buried in Bossier City. Secondly, I stand before you because I admit I am totally biased. I believe that business and commerce is the most critical and important role in the world today. It is what ushers in social, economic, and political change. It is what raises people out of poverty, men, women, and children. My belief has been validated by Gallup's world poll of 10 million people every day. They poll every day, what are the issues, what are the biggest concerns, what are people thinking about? And you might find it interesting to know that they have documented that the single most searing, clarifying, world-altering fact is the whole world wants more than anything a good full-time job. So whether in Boise, Afghanistan, Twin Falls, or Haiti, we all want something that is the same. We want a job, because with that job becomes and comes dignity of purpose. Arthur Brooks wrote an amazing article called The Secret to Success. The bottom line was the only secret to success, or to happiness actually, is earned success. So Jim Clifton of Gallup says that we are in a war for jobs, a war for all the marbles, and the global war for jobs determines the leader of the free world, and therefore, my friends, the values that this world, the entire world, will embrace. Right now, there are 1.2 billion full-time formal jobs in the world, and there are 3 billion people who are looking or working and looking for work. So that leaves us 1.8 billion jobs short. If you are asking what would suddenly create worldwide peace, global well-being, and the next extraordinary advancements in human development, the immediate appearance of 1.8 billion formal jobs. Nothing would change the current state of humankind more. I'll never forget, on a Red Cross mission to Haiti, a woman pulled on my sleeve and through a translator said, "I want to thank the Red Cross for saving my life, but I have 10 children. Please help me find work." I believe that, honestly, the most important philanthropy are many of the people that will be speaking to you today and some of the people in this audience. The most critical philanthropists are people who create dignity of purpose, who create innovation, and find opportunities for people to find their happiness through earned success. So speaking of jobs, in October of 1972, at the age of 22, overdrawn on my checking account, wearing a polyester pantsuit, and driving a powder blue Pinto, I thought was the ultimate driving machine, I moved to Greensboro, North Carolina, a city I had only visited once, to start Pace magazine for an airline called Piedmont. Well, little did I know that I had heeded my grandfather's most critical and important message, and that was, it's more important to select your partners than to select your business. Well, Pace Communications started with 1.5 employees, and myself and a part-time assistant, and today we are one of the largest content providers in America, with offices in North Carolina, New York, Dallas, and yes, even Bentonville, Arkansas. So our clients include brands such as USAA, Walmart, Wells Fargo, Four Seasons, U.S. Airways, Southwest, and Verizon, just to name a few. And by the way, in 2008, we announced that we were not going to participate in the recession, that we were going to use that time to innovate and seek new business. And I'm happy to report that in the last 3 years, PACE has grown by 45%. Thank you, Craig. What I am most proud of at PACE is not just what we do, but who we are. We are a company who has built Habitat houses. We started the first women's billion-dollar leadership giving for United Way in Greensboro. We are now leading the Tiffany Circle, the women's leadership giving for American Red Cross. And honestly, we have done this all by creating a culture of giving back. And by the way, our company tithes 10% of our profits to our community foundation every year. But we were in a critical time of renewing a piece of business many years ago that represented almost 45% of our company's top-line revenue. There was a very good chance we were going to lose that business. And I remember awakening at 3 a.m., slightly before my normal wake-up time, thinking all these employees' lives are at risk. What am I going to do? And honestly, in that moment, I decided that we would raise our tithing from 10% to 15% because it was important to know what the character of our organization was in difficult times, not just in good times. So no matter what the outcome, I made a commitment to 15%, and we have done it ever since, and I'm happy to report not only did we get the business, we got the longest term contract in the history of our company. So I think, why do I bother to tell you that? And honestly, it's not to boast or brag, but it's to plant a seed. Because I do think women-owned businesses can somehow march to a different drummer. You have the opportunity of doing that, and perhaps how you give back will determine and be a differentiator in your own organizations. But by the way, did you know that women control 51% of the private wealth today? We own more than half of the stock on the New York Stock Exchange, and we manage 83% of household income. We're responsible for 81% of all goods and services purchased. And my friend Melanie Sablehouse says that can't all be shoes. We also live 7 years longer, and there is a tremendous intergenerational transfer of wealth in the next 20 years of over $100 trillion, and that will largely end in women's hands. In fact, you may not be aware that women-owned businesses actually employ more people than all the Fortune 500 companies combined. So let me just say that I believe that women are not only good for business, but I believe that women are good for our communities. But what does that mean, and who cares? I think it's interesting to know that women-owned businesses, that 70% volunteer at least once a month, 31% contribute to annual charities of over $10,000. So maybe we are creating a sisterhood. A friend of mine, P.K. Shirley, says that honestly, a woman will tell more to a stranger on a Greyhound bus than a man will tell his best friend in a lifetime. Well, true. In 2002, I had the privilege of serving in Finland. Yes, I was better known as the Frozen Chosen. But I founded a Women Business Leaders Summit because I thought, what can I bring uniquely to a State Department environment that reflects the values? Because really, ultimately, what an ambassador does is they reflect the values of the country that you are coming from. So I decided to identify 50 women entrepreneurs in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Russia, and Finland, and then find a counterpart in America that was a CEO in the same business. So if you were in the telecommunications business, I found someone that was a CEO in the telecommunications business in America. 50 women CEOs came to Helsinki. We talked about failing forward, surviving my biggest mistakes, life balance, accessing capital, one-on-one. Then these women came back to visit the woman CEO they'd been partnered with in their business in America and spent 3 days in their home and going to work with them. It's a lot easier to learn experientially than to have someone tell you what it's like to work and be in an entrepreneurial company in America. We then went to Georgetown University and talked about how to create jobs, how to create partnerships. And I'm proud that the President of the United States, the head of the NSA at the time, Condoleezza Rice, and Secretary Powell all welcomed these women to the White House and to the State Department. They recognized how critical the success of not only America is, but the success of other countries around the world. And that project developed over $10 million of new business. 10 new companies were formed and 9 new partnerships. And I'm also happy that Tammy Longenberger, whom I call the billion-dollar basket woman, also came to Helsinki as part of that program, and I'm glad you're here today, Tammy. Thank you. So that program, because I think as women we don't want to do one-offs, we want to create a business model and replicate it. So that business model was then replicated in Latvia, again for Russia, and then ultimately in Jordan for women from Iraq, Palestine, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Bahrain. And let me just assure you, the women from the Middle East are extraordinary. When we speak of a glass ceiling, it seems somehow ridiculous in the face of the obstacles that they have already overcome. And let me just assure you that this may have been a mentoring program where it was one, but we received far more from the women of these countries than we were ever able to give. So the third reason that I think I stand before you today is that I happen to know, not just believe, but I know, I have seen it, that poverty rests on the shoulders of women and children. Whether it's in shelters in Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama after Katrina, or whether it's in the Darfur refugee camps, or when Steve and I have traveled to some of the most vulnerable places, Chad. I have to tell you, what we see is women and children desperately needing our services. So let me ask you a question. So if we are not going to help each other, who is? So I want to encourage every woman here to volunteer and to serve on a philanthropic board. Yes, I know you don't have time, but you must make time, because the truth is all of our success only matters when we share and when we lift while we climb. I think that I want to tell you a story in closing, that I was invited once to the $1 Million Roundtable for women's, for the United Way. And I remember sitting at a table, at a breakout table, where we were supposed to come up with ideas. And I remember coming up with the thinking, I'm going to ask women to give in my own community for de Tocqueville, because I'd asked to be the chair of it. And I have to tell you, the first time someone asked me for $10,000 in my office, I almost threw them out. I actually was angry with David and Joanne Grimes for quite some time, thinking, how did they think that I had the capacity to give $10,000? Well, I did. And honestly, it changed my life. I ended up chairing the first women's giving in my hometown because nobody had ever received more than 2 or 3 people in de Tocqueville, and my goal was 40. But I remember talking about the idea at a conference, and a man said to me, that is a ridiculous idea. How in the world are you going to get women to give? Women don't give. I said, women don't give if women aren't asked. I asked. We got 41 women in Greensboro, North Carolina, a community of 225,000 the first year. We got 80 the second year. The third year, we had 100. So at that same conference, I heard Jerry Panis speak, and he told me the story about the Girl Scout who sold the most Girl Scout cookies, 20,000 of them. She sat in the chair next to David Letterman with her feet dangling, and David asked her, well, how in the world did you sell so many cookies? And she said, well, Mr. Letterman, sometimes you just have to stop talking. Well, we stopped talking, and today that program was the formula for 100 communities with 100 women giving $10,000 a year for 10 years. And I'm happy to report that last year, United Way reached $1 billion in women-only leadership giving. So let me just tell you that there are going to be people like the gentleman who had a knot in his knickers at my table who are going to tell you it can't be done. And my point is, they are valuable too, because he made me more determined. And I looked at him as that little irritant inside the clamshell while I was forming a pearl. So he had no idea that that was a $1 billion pearl. So I'm grateful for them. You will run into them too, but they are there to make you more determined, because women are not a minority. We are a majority. We are not victims. We are powerful. We have to lift while we climb. So let me speak about one last thing, because I think there is sometimes an elephant in the room. Adrienne Rich says that the connections between and among women are the most feared, problematic, and the most potentially transforming force on the planet. But women are not always sisters. In fact, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. Visit the Women's Suffrage Museum in Washington. Men actually were not the largest opponents and obstacles in many ways to women's voting. Other women were. I think every woman on the stage that you will hear from on the panel will tell you that men have been some of our strongest partners, strongest advocates. But we must be reminded that honestly, if women will ever totally take hands and stop holding each other to a higher standard than we hold men, we can transform this world and make it an incredibly better place. So, most of us in this room will not be called to do great things. But all of us in this room will be called to do small things with great love. Surely helping other women is one of the small things we can do with great love. So in closing, my friend Dr. Tom Toole says, there are two most important days in our life: the day we're born and the day we understand why. I'm grateful that you are on my journey and that perhaps we will find the why together. Alan Sherman wrote musical parodies. You may remember, "Hello, Mother, hello, Father, here I am in camp." Yes. There's some people here over 20. Well, I'd like to read to you. He wrote one song that I think is just worth hearing in closing. You're born, you weep, you smile, you sleep, you cling, you crawl, you stand, you fall, you stand again and try, and then you walk. You eat, you drink, you feel, you think, you play, you grow, you learn, you know, and then one day you find a way to talk. You're young, you fly, you laugh, you cry, you're grown, you're on your own at last. You lose, you win. Your days begin to slip away. Too fast, too fast. Too soon will come a distant drum. Too soon the time to go will come. And time won't wait. Is it too late to ask, did I ever love? Did I ever give? Did I ever really, really live? Surely living and giving is about friendship, but generosity of spirit knows no gender, and destiny stands in need of 100% of our resources, both male and female. I am grateful today for the friendship, extraordinary friendship, of Sandra Day O'Connor, Teresa Carlson, Tammy Longenberger, Wendy Strong, and yes, even Steve Carr. I hope we will all use this time at the Andrus Center Conference to build new friendships and put our faith to work. As my friend Dr. Court said about this life that we have the privilege of passing through, we ultimately have only three things: relationships, experiences, and memories. I hope the program at the Andrus Center you will find all three. Thank you.